What's up and welcome to my Alienware Area 51M review. After having had it for 15 months, technically I'm just going to label it 1 year, but it's been a little bit more than that. Now I've used this laptop pretty much exclusively for that entire period of time. I also have a desktop which I used somewhat during that time, but probably 80% of my computing time was spent using this machine with the keyboard and mouse built into the machine. So we're going to talk about wear and tear. We're going to talk about everything that's broken so far on the machine, all the issues I've had with it, and the kind of things that you don't really notice when you initially get the laptop, but over time start to get more and more annoying and that start to stand out more. Now I'm also going to be comparing the performance that I'm getting with the machine now versus when I first bought it last year. The goal of this comparison, of course, is to determine did the performance reduce over time or not. Now before we get started, I want to mention that I'm posting articles of all of these tech review videos over to gizmoslip.tech. So if you prefer to see the written version, then go check that out. And also I probably put in quite a bit more detail into the written version just because I don't skim any of the details like I do when I'm actually filming these videos. Without further ado, let's get this thing started. The first major pro is that this thing has been very reliable for its core components. Like I've not had any issues with the processor, the GPU, the overall performance. As long as I've tuned it to the right settings, the right fan speeds, I've had great overall performance the entire time that I've used the laptop. Probably over 1,000 hours of gameplay on this thing with no issues on the core components. So that's really, really fantastic. Now, before we get into all the negative things about the machine that I've discovered, I also want to talk about the things that I've grown to really, really love about this machine and that I will miss when I switch off of this machine. And that brings me to my next major pro. The ergonomics of this keyboard are fantastic. I think this is my favorite keyboard on any laptop. The only one that maybe is competing with it is the MSI GT75. Insanely great mechanical keyboard on that laptop. But this one has deep key travel. I love the layout. I love the numpad. I really, really enjoyed the keyboard on this laptop. So 2 giant thumbs up. We've got an excellent backlight on the keyboard. Every single symbol is illuminated and it's bright and it's evenly lit. Another thing I've loved about this machine is the touchpad. It's smooth glass display with the deep mechanical buttons that work really well and really consistently. So again, 2 giant thumbs up. Now the 144 Hz display has been great, high refresh rate, no ghosting, great for gaming. Now it's a little bit obsolete when you compare it to the latest displays that are coming out. First of all, you have the 300 Hz and 240 Hz displays that are pretty much becoming the standard on high-end laptops these days. And then you have the Razer Blade Pro 17, which I recently reviewed, and that display has a 4K 120 Hz really high nits brightness and color gamut display. It made me realize how lackluster this display truly is and the potential of displays that are currently out there. Namely, mainly that Razer Blade Pro 17. There are a couple other laptops that will have a similar display, but not many. I think another pro for this machine is that it has had minimal wear and tear from a cosmetic perspective. I honestly didn't even realize it, but when Carla was filming the B-roll, she noticed that there are a couple of darker spots for where my wrists set on the laptop. And it's just basically discoloration from oil coming off my skin. Maybe a little sad to realize it, but I mean, this is 15 months in and you can just barely see it if you have just the right lighting. I imagine 3 or 4 years of owning this laptop, those discoloration spots would get much more noticeable. Aside from that, cosmetically, like the little details and wear and tear, this thing still looks brand new. Overall wear and tear on this has been extremely minimal. The hinge is still very stable and sturdy. The keys aren't coming apart. All of this stuff, it's hanging together. In all the important ways, this laptop has not come apart or failed me. Okay, it's time to compare the performance of the machine as it is now versus when I first got it. Now, something to note is that we do have a plus 100 megahertz overclock, and this is like baked into the Alienware Command Center software as best I can tell. I do not believe I did this manually, and I can't seem to turn it off. The Command Center software is so buggy. This is one of the cons we're gonna get into a little bit later. Know that we're at a plus 100 megahertz overclock on the GPU for these benchmarks for the current stuff. Even though sometimes the performance is not actually reflective of that, it's a little weird. Without further ado, let's just hop right into it. First up, we have 3D Mark Firestrike Ultra. We only have a 150 point difference between the 2 laptops, which is very minor. Honestly, if you run the test a bunch of times, you'll have more of a variance than that, just in multiple runs, so I don't think that's a big deal. And then we have 3D Mark Time Spy Graphics. We actually have a 250 60-point difference here, with it performing better when I first got the machine, which is interesting. Now, the first evidence of performance degradation here, we have the 4K handbrake render time. We came in at 35 seconds longer now than when I first got the machine. For now, I'm not going to say why, but we're going to see more and more evidence, and we'll see if we can piece it all together on why we have a drop in performance. When you take a look at the Far Cry 5 CPU temperatures and GPU temperatures, you can see that we actually had 10 degrees more on the CPU in the same type of scenario. The Far Cry 5 benchmark, on the other hand, we have 3 more frames in the current version of the laptop than the old version of the laptop. There's a number of reasons for this. First of all, we've got new drivers. Those new drivers might perform slightly better. Second of all, we do have a slight GPU overclock, as I mentioned before, so that also affects things a little bit. When we jump to Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we've got 119 FPS currently versus 116. Again, drivers slowly improve over time, and again, the slight overclock. Now, when we got to Cinebench R15 multi-runs in a row, we start to see some serious CPU throttling on the temperatures. So before, we would get 88 degrees on average with the max spiked temperature of 94 degrees. That's not bad at all. And more importantly, because we never hit the 100-degree threshold, we never thermally throttled. We maintained a perfect 4.6 gigahertz clock basically the whole time. As soon as the laptop hits the 100 degrees Celsius mark, that's when thermal throttling starts to occur on this laptop. So we started seeing slight dips in the clock speeds when we hit that 100 degrees temperature threshold. That said, the overall performance in Cinebench, because it wasn't a long sustained load, was very, very similar. We only had a slight decrease. And that brings me to explaining why we had significantly worse performance on the handbrake render test. And that's simply because we were thermally throttling, hitting 100 degrees Celsius consistently, and the clock speed was dropping, therefore extending our render time. So all of this to me tells me that it's time to repaste the CPU. The simple fact is thermal paste dries out and breaks down over time, and you have reduced thermal performance. And when you're dealing with a laptop that has this spicy of hardware, you want to make sure your thermal paste is on top of the game. Otherwise, you're going to start to see degradations in performance. But when we take a look at the CPU performance, we're seeing a degradation of the CPU performance primarily due to thermal throttling. Now, I have not repasted the CPU since I initially purchased the laptop, but I do want to make it clear that I cleaned out the fans shortly before running these benchmarks. Now, one note I do want to make about these benchmarks is that we are hitting 100 degrees Celsius, but the laptops had no problems rendering videos or playing games. And when playing games, I haven't been hitting that 100 degrees Celsius mark just because the laptop doesn't become thermally saturated the same way it does when you're rendering video. I have been running out at the full speed fan profile setting, basically at all times, unless I'm just like browsing the web or something. And that of course means that we're going to be dealing with quite a bit of noise coming out of this machine. Thankfully, the fans when you're on max is kind of a low whoosh. They're not too loud and whiny like they are on some of the thinner laptops, but still it is more fan noise than I would like to have in an ideal situation. Another major downside is that the trackpad no longer lights up like it did when I first bought the laptop, and the rear of the device, the Tron light on the back, also no longer lights up. Now, when I first got the laptop, the Tron light was not functioning, and it was very disappointing. I took the laptop apart and found that the plug had wiggled out of the connector, and so I just plugged it back in and the Tron light came right back on, and it was good for like 6 months. And then both of the lights stopped working somewhere like around 6 months after having the device. I don't know, I just assumed that it had wiggled out again. Unfortunately, when I was cleaning out the fans a week and a half ago, I did double check all the connectors, and as far as I can tell, everything's plugged in. The lights still aren't working. So that means that we might need to do a hardware replacement. Thankfully, this is still under warranty through HID Evolution, so I can always send it to them and have the hardware replaced. I haven't done that yet, I probably will soon. Now, the next major con for this device is the Alienware Command Center software. First of all, when you need to change the fan profile, so you want to go to balanced for quiet fans versus full speed for high performance mode, you have to use the Alienware Command Center software. When you open the Command Center software, sometimes it needs to update. And when it updates before you can touch or change any of the settings. And that means that if you're in a noise sensitive environment, you open the laptop, the fans go, whoo, and everyone in the library looks at you. you're stuck there waiting for the program to fully update through slow library internet before you can change the fan profile to balance, which is a very sucky software design. So I really hope that they make the fan control profiles to be independent of the updating of the software, or at least allow you to just not update the software. Updates should always be optional in my opinion, because sometimes updates break things. This is very minor, but it is still very annoying. Whenever I reboot the machine or put it to sleep and wake it up, it goes to a blue lighting backlight for the keyboard, and I don't want that. I like this rainbow wave colorful look, but in order to get the colorful look back, I have to open the Alienware Command Center software and just click the FX tab, and then for some reason it just instantly sets it back to the rainbow wave. Something's messed up with the software here. Probably, I imagine, a full reinstall of Windows would fix that issue, but it's hard to say. Now, this is also a fairly minor thing, but because we have desktop components, both the GPU and the CPU in this machine, when the power plug is suddenly yanked or pulled, or let's say the intermediate connector here is pulled out, if the computer is under load, sometimes the computer will just completely shut off like instantly. And the reason this happens is because the battery is not capable of handling that much juice and throughput all of a sudden to keep the game open or whatever processing task you have open. So the computer just shuts off, resulting in lost data or an interruption of your gameplay. Just a minor thing. Like most laptops, if you were to unplug them, they would keep playing the game or whatever without crashing. Not the case with this laptop sometimes. Now, another con that's fairly minor is that this laptop requires 2 power adapters. When I first got the laptop, I thought I'd be able to play games on just the 330 watt power adapter in a pinch. Turns out, yes, you can do that, but unfortunately, games do get quite a bit more stuttery. If you want perfectly smooth gameplay, you'll need both power adapters. That brings me to my next con. This laptop just isn't nearly as portable as a lot of other smaller laptops, and this is one of the most obvious cons. So I'm just going to briefly talk about it. The fact that you have 2 power adapters and a very heavy, large volume laptop in the first place requires a very large bag and durable, strong shoulders to haul it around on. So if you're going to get this thing, know that it's kind of a beast, and you're going to have to go into beast mode when you haul it around. Now, this one actually really surprised me. This laptop is actually a great laptop to have in your lap, as long as you're not doing really heavy intensive processes. If you keep this thing on full speed fan mode and then put it in your lap, it's like an air conditioner for your legs. Like air is whooshing so much that it's like cooling your body. It's really actually quite nice. Now, the other major area where portability suffers is the battery life. Of course, we have desktop components in here, so the battery life really sucks. But how bad does it suck? It sucks so bad that you only get like an hour and a half of watching Netflix, which is an absurdly low amount of time in my opinion. And it just makes sense. Again, desktop components, you're just gonna murder this battery so fast. So let's get down to the core question here. Would I buy the Area 51M again? And would I recommend it to others who are interested in potentially buying it? The answer is no, I would not buy it personally, but I could see how other people who want to leverage the desktop CPU in this thing and have the maximum possible gaming performance would love this machine. If you're gonna buy this machine, you have to recognize that you're not gonna get much battery life, and you're probably not gonna wanna move it around that much. And the simple fact is, before the pandemic, I was moving this around like twice a day, every day, to different locations, which resulted in me hauling 2 power adapters and this laptop in my bag, plugging those power adapters in. It's a lot of extra hassle doing all that work. Overall, you know, I've been very happy with the machine, but I feel like something like the Razer Blade Pro 17, which is what I have right here, is actually gonna suit my needs quite a bit better in the interim for now. Maybe sometime in the future, if I start rendering a lot more videos on my laptop again, then I will probably look at a thicker machine like this, maybe. But for right now, I've got an editor that's editing on a desktop. So this laptop's not even seeing that many videos being edited on it in the first place for right now. So in short, I'm switching to the Razer Blade Pro 17. Right now, just because the GPU performance is so close, so similar, and the CPU performance is like a 70-80% of the way there, but it's in such a thinner and lighter package with better battery life and a much better display. Well, that's it for this review of the Alienware Area 51M. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see more awesome tech videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I will see you in the next one. Brandon out. Watcha.